Hey, this is Seth Parnell, minister at Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 126 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope everything is going well. Hope things are going good your way. We appreciate you being here tonight, and like I said, hope things are going good for you. It's been a beautiful day outside. If you're outside, this is that sweet spot of fall where the temperatures are just right. It's pleasant, in the afternoon, and it only gets chilly when you're like late at night. And so it's been a good day as far as getting out and such. But we appreciate you being here, whether you're watching it now or later on, and hope that you know that we care about you and we love you, and hope that everything is going well for you. We want to always extend you an invitation. If you're someone who is in the Portia area, please feel free to get in contact with us or to come worship with us. We are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. Right now we are meeting at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock for Sunday morning. 10 o'clock, we're having a class on the book of Ephesians, which I know that you will enjoy. Robert Davis is teaching that class, and he does an excellent job, whatever mode of teaching that he does. But he's teaching that class, and then we have our worship service at 11, and then we have. Let me see. We have our Sunday night service is at 5 o'clock, and this Sunday night we have, I believe it's this. Yeah, this Sunday night we have a food and fellowship. And so if you wanna, you wanna come by and join us for a meal, you can do that. This Sunday and this Sunday night at least. And so we're starting that at 5, and our Wednesday night services are at 6 o'clock. And so if you're around the area, I hope you can join us sometime. We would love to see you, love to worship with you. Also, if you have any questions or any need any clarifications about what we studied tonight, then please feel free to get in contact us. Or if you have any suggestions for future episodes, we always enjoy hearing what you think and hearing how you what you would like to hear about. And so we welcome that as well. But with that, I think that's all of our introductory that we have tonight. I know we got some good episodes coming down the line. This is a busy time of the year, and so I know I've been doing a lot of individual episodes, but I think we've got some good ones coming down the line here as we get into the end of the year. If you can believe it, it's the end of the year is approaching. We've only got 2 more months left. And time flies very, very fast. It's good to see the mailings. I hope that you guys are doing all right. I hope you're doing good. I haven't seen you guys in a while, but I know you guys are holding down the street up there and doing good. Always good to hear from you guys. We're going to take a brief look tonight at some thoughts on Judges chapter 16. As Judges, as its name implies, tells the story of the judges, people who rose to power and were appointed, for specific instances. When Israel, was brought into a time of oppression, when they were brought into a time in which they were getting beat down by other nations, in which they were getting oppressed, and their things were being taken away, their independence was being taken away. A judge would rise up at this time, and he would judge the nation. He would lead the nation. Oftentimes, he would lead the deliverance, from whatever threat they were facing, and then he would kind of preside over them until his death. And unlike a king, these judges, would rise up. They would serve, and then after their death, that was kind of the end of it. Their son didn't, take over their place, as judge, or it wasn't like a hereditary thing, but it was, just people who rose up for that specific instance, and then, they were done. And so we have several of those, that we read about in the book of Judges. You think of, Deborah and Barak. You think of, Gideon. You think of others that rose up in these times of need that Israel had. You think of Ehud, the left-handed judge. It's there's a lot of good stories about judges that were who had some very difficult circumstances to work through, but still were able to get through them. And these people weren't perfect. They weren't. A lot of times, they had some flaws in themselves, as we're going to see here, with the one that we're studying with tonight. And it's good to have some people from India. Hope you guys are doing well. We appreciate you stopping by. Hope everything's going good on your end. But let's see here, in Judges chapter 16, we're going to take a look here and see what this story has to say, and see if we can get some good things from it. Here starting in verse 4 here in Judges chapter 16, it says, after this, talking about the judge Samson, it says, after this he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came up to her and said to her, seduce him and see where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to humble him. And we will give each of you, and we will each give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength lies, and how you might be bound, that one could subdue you. Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. Then the lords of the Philistines brought up to her 7 fresh bowstrings that had not been dried, and she bound him with them. Now she had been lying in ambush in an inner chamber. And she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he snapped the bowstrings as a thread of flax snaps when it touches the fire. And so the secret of his strength was not known. And so we see here, Samson is one of he's an interesting judge to take a look at, because while he had the position of leading people, and leading them, it says that he judged Israel for over 20 years. He was someone who had a lot to go with, but yet, as far as flaws go, Samson probably takes the cake as far as, having the most flaws. He was someone who did a lot of things that you kind of scratch your head and be like, Samson, why did you do that? What was your motivation, for doing this? And he would cause a lot of destruction, during his time, because the big thing that Samson is known for is his strength, his supernatural strength that God had blessed him with. And he did some amazing things with it. You read throughout the past of the story, you read how he defeated 1,000 men with the jawbone of a donkey, how he picked up the entire gates of a city and carried them to the top of the hill. He did a lot. And this was something that he was known for. But here in chapter 16, it says that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And Delilah is pretty famous too. When you think of Samson, usually automatically you think of Delilah as well. And so she comes into the picture, and Samson, he kind of starts associating himself with her. And when the Philistines notice this, they come up to Delilah and they basically say, we want you to find the secret of his strength, because they had lost, 1,000 people, trying to capture Samson. And so they weren't ready to just come full force and, capture this man, but they're going to try something, sneaky at this time. And so they said to Delilah, we will give you 1,100 pieces of silver each, and there were 5 lords of the Philistines, and so that's 1,100 times 5. And if you can discover, the source of the strength, which 1,100 pieces of silver, that's quite a lot. That's a lot of money, especially during that time. And so Delilah, we don't have a lot of resistance from her. Apparently, it didn't take much for her to acquiesce to this request, and so she goes about this and starts to kind of probe and try to figure out what is the source of Samson's strength. And so the first thing that she asks him, and she asks him a direct question. Down there, if you look down there in verse 6, it says, "So Delilah said to Samson, 'Please tell me where your great strength lies, and how you might be bound, and that one could subdue you.'" And you might think, the very nature of this question, the very fact that she asked this question in the first place is suspicious. It seems like that would be a red flag right there. But according to Samson, at least from what we get from Samson, he didn't see it, that way. And so, but he's at least smart enough in this case not to give her the true answer, not to give her, the correct answer. And so instead, he lies. As we said, Samson is someone who had he had a lot of flaws during his time. He's not, the character of Samson is not a model that should be followed, but rather the accomplishments that he made are something that's pretty great. But in verse 7 it says, "Samson said to her, 'If they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, then I shall become weak like any other man.'" And so this is something that was, of course, an outright lie. The source of his strength had nothing to do with bowstrings or even being bound with anything. Samson knew that, and so he just conjures up this this story about bowstrings and tries to convince her that this is the answer. But Delilah was someone who maybe she suspected this, and so she put this theory to the test. And so she gets a hold of these bowstrings and she binds Samson up, and then goes into the next room and says, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you." And this wasn't an idle threat either. There were actually Philistines out there. And Samson gets up, and since he was a lie, he snapped him right off and went to fighting. And so Delilah knew that Samson had lied in this case. And so this is something that goes on for a little bit. It goes on for a while. He comes up with some other stories to tell her, such as he talks about weaving his hair in a certain position, a certain way. If his hair is weaved in a certain way, then that will be the source of his strength. He tells her, if he binds me with new ropes that hasn't been used, ropes that that are brand new, and that will be the source of his strength. But we know that all of those were untrue. Samson was at least he was smart enough not to give the correct answer right away, but yet he wasn't smart enough to see what was happening, to understand what was going on in this situation. And when you read the story, you kind of want to reach through the pages and shake Samson a little bit and say, "Hey, can't you see what's going on? Can't you understand what's happening? Don't you know that this woman is trying her absolute best to enrich herself at your expense?" But Samson, he doesn't see the warning signs that appear here, and which like I said, it's something that is at first we're like Samson, how could you not see this? What's wrong with you? But sometimes warning signs are a little bit hard to see, especially when we think about how we walk as a Christian. And some of the warning signs that we might see that a part of our faith is failing, or that your temptation is creeping in. Sometimes we don't see, that a problem is becoming a problem until it becomes a big problem. And that happens because that we are human, and because we oftentimes don't see those warning signs that creep up. If we did, we would be perfect, and we would see, every problem, and we would, make the right decision every time, and we will be perfect. But the problem with that is, instead of being perfect, we're human. And we do make those mistakes. We do miss those warning signs, and we do let things become a bigger problem than they should have been, or that they could be. And this is what Samson was guilty of in this case. He either he was arrogant enough, to think that no matter what happened, he could, use the strength to brute force through it, or he was someone that just, didn't realize how dangerous, this situation was. And oftentimes, like I said, that's what we do. When a person, falls in their faith, when they're someone who, succumbs, to temptation, many times it's not, one big, cataclysmic event, that happens, that, pushes a person away or throws a person to the deep end, of sin, just right away. But oftentimes it's that gradual process. It's those soft blows that kind of weaken our defense, over a period of time, that cause us to slowly, kind of gravitate towards whatever that, weakness that we have, is. Samuel or Samson. I don't know why I keep calling him Samuel, but Samson, he had a lot of weaknesses. He had, as far as sexual immorality goes, he had a big problem with that. That plays into this story. He had a problem with, I think, with ego and with pride. I think he had a problem with honesty. He didn't always tell the truth. Like I said, he had those problems, and sometimes we, like I said, it's much easier. It's a lot harder to notice, like I said, when we're drifting aside, and when we're not, we have those kind of little things that kind of make us more comfortable with sin. We all have a conscience. We all have that kind of that sense. There sometimes when we sin, when we do make mistakes, sometimes we don't realize that it was a mistake. We don't realize that it was sin until later, and then we realize what we've done, and so we have to make amends for it. And then there are some times where there are things that we know that are wrong, but we still do them anyway. Sometimes we do that as well. Even the best of people sometimes succumb to that. And so the and that that type of thing we need to be careful about. As both Paul and Peter talk about being diligent, about being someone who stands firm in the faith, and doesn't let ourselves be tossed to one side or tossed to the other side, either by false doctrine or by temptation that comes in. But we need to be someone who stands firm always. And Samson was someone, like I said, I think one big reason why he didn't have maybe why he didn't succeed in the situation is that it appears that he was by himself. Samson, no other people are mentioned in the story other than the Philistines and Delilah. And Delilah's not looking after him. She wants to use him in order to enrich herself. And so no one is there to kind of elbow Samson and say, hey, this is a problem. You need to straighten up. No one was there to look after, to hold him accountable, or to encourage him. And that in the end, I think that's a big reason, why he failed. The church is something, that's one of the things that it helps us with. It reminds us, and it's something, that holds us accountable for how we live our life. A lot of times, people talk about, the idea of judging. and the idea of not being judgmental of a person, you're not being someone who judges others. And it's true that we're not supposed to be someone who judges people by false criteria. You don't want to judge somebody based upon their wealth, or based upon how charismatic they are. We don't need to judge people on the outward appearance of them. But there is a difference between holding people accountable and for their actions and the way they live their life, and judging people unnecessarily. Because we have a case in 1 Corinthians where the Corinthian church, which had a lot of problems on their own, they had a lot of issues that they had to work through as well. They were very, very, very tolerant people. They even had people who were doing things that Paul says that the pagans wouldn't even tolerate. They were allowing almost anything and everything. Someone might say, well, they were the least judgmental church you could ever go to. But were they a faithful church, or were they a strong church? Were they someone who was doing what they needed to do? Paul says, you guys, need to stop this, right away. You need to hold this person, accountable for what he's doing, because, the damage to the reputation, of the church can be immense. And so he encouraged, the church there to hold this person, accountable. And that's what the church can do for us. It needs to hold us accountable for what we do and for what we say. And it's something that is done in love. It's not something that is done with self-righteousness or with pride. We don't hold others accountable because we think we're better than them, or because we think that we're more spiritual than them. But we do it because we love them. We do it because we want them to be strong, and we want them to be glorifying God with what they do. We want them to do what they can in order to walk that narrow road. Because being a Christian sometimes is tough. And like we said, sometimes we ourselves are kind of self-blinded by that veering off that we do, that gradual veering off that we do. But maybe someone else can notice that, and they can see that we're starting to move towards that weakness of ours. And they can elbow us, and they can talk to us and say, hey, this is what's going on, and we need to get you back on track. The church and people in the church, that they hold us accountable, which we need. And that's something that we can be truly thankful for, because the church can encourage, and it can also hold us accountable for what we do. And like I said, I think that's something that would have done Samson a whole lot of good in this case. But it appears, at least in this situation, all he had was Delilah, and we know how she felt. And so he says, if they, he went through this case where if they bind me with new ropes, I'll be weak like any other man. But this repeated, and then you get down to verse 13. It says, then Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me how you might be bound. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks on my head with a web and fasten it tight with a pin, then I shall become weak and like any other man. And so Delilah starts to play like she's the one being taken advantage of, like she's the one who's being used, that he's mocking her and lying to her, which he did lie to her, but that's not, I don't think that's how she is portraying it. And so they go through this process again. She puts his hair into a web, and she made it tight. And then when she awoke him from a sleep and pulled away the pin, and Samson was able to fight again. And then finally, when you get down here to verse 15, and it says, and she said to him, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me these 3 times, and you have not told me where your great strength lies. And she had enough in this case, and she said, if you basically said, if you really love me, if you truly love me, then you're going to tell me, what where your strength lies. And even that, didn't work immediately, because it's in verse 16. It says, she pressed him hard with her words, day after day, and urged him, and his soul was vexed to death. And like we said, like we've been talking about tonight, it wasn't just that one request that Delilah had, but it was day after day. Day after day, she says that her words, urged him, and she pressed him hard, with her words. That gradual process eventually broke down that final barrier that was standing between Samson and really good judgment, and the secret to his strength. And so he tells him, all of his heart, to her, and she does like she does, the other 3 times, and she shaves his head, and he loses his strength. And because of this, Samson would lose his eyes. His eyes, would be put out. He would be, captured by the Philistines, and they would, make fun of him and make him into a sport and do all of that. And it would be a really sad ending, if not for, the very last part of the story of Samson, which we know, in which a wounded and a humiliated, Samson, asked, to be put between the 2 pillars, of the arena, and God gives him one last gasp of strength, and he's able to collapse, the entire, structure. And it says that he killed more Philistines in his death than he did, in his lifetime. But you think that, Samson, if he just could have seen, those warning signs, he would have, he could have done, so much more, with his life and with what he could do. But alas, he's someone who is also human, and he made, those mistakes, that he did. So not only do we need to be aware of it, of ourselves, we also need to hold other people accountable, as well, with love and with gentleness and with respect, and with a good spirit. We don't ever want to communicate, the fact that we're trying to help someone or talking down to someone in that case. But we always want to be someone to make sure that the reason why we're helping our brother is because we love them, because we want what's best for them. And the one, but even though Samson, like I said, there's good and bad in him, and the one positive thing for Samson is that even though he did a lot of things that were against, God's law, he never forgot about God. He's kind of like David, I think, in the sense that he didn't worship any false idols, but yet even when he was thrown into, with his eyes gouged out, and he was, thrown into the Philistine, dungeon, and was grinding in the dungeon, he still remembered God, and he still prayed to God. And so no matter, what we're going through, no matter the situation that we find ourselves in, don't forget about God. Even if you're someone who has, done, a multitude of things that are against, the standard that he's called us to live, or against his commandments. If you've done sin upon sin upon sin, don't forget about God. Samson didn't, and in the end, that saved him. In the end, he was able to do something, great. If we don't forget about God, if we don't forget about him and what he can do for us and how we can serve him and what he means to us, even when we stray away, even when we do make those mistakes, we can have a happy ending to our story. Just like Samson does here. But hopefully, if we're mindful and if we're diligent, we won't have to suffer some of the things that Samson did in this case. Losing his eyes was not part of the plan that Samson had, but it was the consequences of his decisions. But even though he still didn't forget about God, in that case. And so I think we will stop there and maybe pick it up again some other time. But we appreciate everyone being here tonight. We are so glad that you decided to spend this Thursday night with us, or whatever time that you are watching this. We hope that we do appreciate you, and if this is something that is benefits you, then please feel free to share it with anybody that you think you could use it. And like I said, I think we're gonna have some good episodes coming up in the future. But until then, we hope that, like I said, we hope that you have a wonderful week, a wonderful end of the week, and we hope that you can go out and be the light of the world and glorify God in everything that you do. And we'll catch you next time.